An astonishing transformation occurs when a person ceases to actively pursue external validation. This shift is initially barely perceptible, almost invisible to an outside observer, but the very moment someone stops striving to be chosen or accepted, those around them begin to experience profound bewilderment, questioning the reasons for such behavior. This is not mere curiosity, but rather a manifestation of unfamiliar discomfort. In a world where every step and every word seems permeated with a hunger for self-validation, the one who consciously opts out of this race, unwittingly, gains an extraordinary, almost magnetic appeal. It's worth pausing for a moment to reflect on this phenomenon. Modern reality is permeated by a deafening hum, an incessant chorus of voices striving to be heard. Everywhere, people relentlessly share their thoughts, react to others' statements, and prove their points, desperately trying to stand out from the crowd and attract attention. It is precisely at this moment when someone consciously distances themselves from this bustle, when they are released from the obsessive need to justify themselves to everyone or to satisfy countless demands, that a unique, attractive space emerges around them. People instinctively gravitate towards this oasis of calm, and the reason is not that this person has become louder or more noticeable. On the contrary, they are drawn by the absence of this clamorous pressure, the calming quiet of their presence. The distinguished thinker Carl Jung repeatedly emphasized the concept of individuation in his works, a profound process of becoming a truly whole, authentic individual. This path, in his conviction, does not involve accumulating new qualities or acquiring external attributes, but rather the gradual shedding of numerous false layers and accretions imposed by society, fears, and expectations. Thus, when a person gains a certain unattainability, it does not mean they are deliberately playing manipulative games pretending to be indifferent or detached. The true meaning of this state is that they are so deeply rooted in their own being, so confident in their inner energy and presence, that those around them, without realizing it, begin to sense something in them that they catastrophically lacked in their own lives: unwavering depth, true tranquility, and absolute self-possession. This portends something more than a mere shift in perception. It paves the way for genuine influence and inner freedom. That's when profound changes occur. The very moment an individual stops striving to be constantly available to everyone, they begin to attract the attention of those who truly matter. This is not merely a calculated social tactic. It's a powerful psychological mechanism deeply rooted in human perception of value. Human nature tends to respond to what is perceived as unique or scarce. And when an individual stops thoughtlessly dispersing their energy, when their existence is defined by clear boundaries, clarity of intent, and mindfulness, others involuntarily pay attention to this. The reason lies in the fact that the vast majority are prone to excessive openness, constant availability, and immediate responses to any communication. However, a person who deliberately distances themselves without explaining their actions, without putting their life on public display, and preferring to act in silence, gains a completely different, unique power. The eminent psychoanalyst Carl Jung asserted that the persona, the social mask an individual uses to adapt and survive in society, is a necessary, albeit illusory, construct. However, when a person begins to gradually dissolve this social mask and act from their authentic, deeper self, others either experience profound confusion and discomfort or become genuinely intrigued. There is no in-between state. One can observe how those around them begin to project their own expectations and perceptions onto such an individual. Some will express genuine admiration, others profound indignation at such detachment, but invariably all will experience strong emotions. Here lies the remarkable paradox. The less effort exerted, the more influential the person becomes. The pursuit of approval ceases, the need for constant explanations disappears, and instead of being an easily accessible object for interaction, the person transforms into a mystery that others must unravel by looking into the depths of their own understanding. It is at that moment that a person stops being merely a fleeting diversion and begins to become truly unforgettable. When an individual demonstrates less availability, others involuntarily begin to question their own significance in that person's life. And that's when the entire dynamic of relationships fundamentally shifts. Suddenly, the silence of such a person holds far greater weight than any spoken words. Their absence becomes a kind of mirror, and what people see reflected there is not always pleasant. The truth is, most are unaccustomed to encountering those who do not seek external validation, who do not require endless explanations, and who do not rush to react instantly to every external stimulus. We live in an era where attention is the primary currency. Many strive to attract attention by actively posting content, responding promptly, and reacting to maintain their relevance. But the rarest, and therefore most valuable, is the one who simply makes no effort for such displays. Such people maintain inner calm. Their presence is marked by silence, and therein lies their true strength. Their inner energy is not spent filling meaningless dialogues or creating superficial connections. It is carefully preserved, purposefully directed, and when such individuals manifest themselves, their appearance gains special significance. Such behavior causes genuine bewilderment in others, not because the person themselves has changed, but because they have stopped playing a certain role. They no longer strive to please others. They no longer bargain for their own significance. And the moment an individual stops proving their worth, those around them are forced to accept what has already been demonstrated to them without excess words. This state causes discomfort in others. This happens not because the person is aloof, but rather because they deprive others of the accustomed emotional sustenance they are used to resorting to. And what truly takes them by surprise, the person exhibits no malice, no coldness, no bitterness. They are simply comfortable and complete without their involvement. Such detachment carries a deafening silence that paradoxically roars. It is not a passive reaction. On the contrary, it is entirely deliberate. It's as if it declares to the world, I choose the direction of my energy myself. And such inner clarity possesses an attractive power. When people realize they cannot easily command this person's attention or affection, they begin to wonder if they ever truly knew them. It is at this moment that a person's presence gains weight, becoming significant and desired. This happens not because they made an effort to meet someone's expectations or be a certain way, but because they finally stopped trying at all. A critical moment arrives when a person ceases to feel the need to be noticed, and it is at this paradoxical moment that they become truly noticeable. People often don't realize how much their behavior is shaped by a deep-seated need for approval and validation of their own significance. Their speech grows louder, their dress bolder, they publish more content and constantly strive to explain themselves, not so much from a desire to express truth, but in the hope of hearing that cherished echo. You are important. When an individual breaks free from the shackles of a certain system, without bitterness or resentment, but with deep, unshakable confidence, they transform into something entirely different. Their presence ceases to be inconspicuous. On the contrary, it becomes indefinable, like a question mark in an existence where most are merely solid, unyielding points. Such an existence does not require deliberate attention-seeking, yet by its very nature, without the slightest effort, it draws the gaze of those around them. This power stems not from a game or manipulation, but from a genuine process of returning to one's true, authentic self. Modern society, by its very nature, is accustomed to individuals being easily swayed by external influence, quickly offended by criticism or disapproval, and always available for others' needs and expectations. Consequently, when someone deviates from these accepted norms, they inadvertently disrupt the established behavioral patterns of those around them. People find themselves confused, unsure how to interact with someone who doesn't seek their approval, who doesn't try to justify or explain anything or pursue their goals through manipulation. Such an individual becomes a kind of fixed point, impervious to external influences. It is in this inner stability and silence that others are forced to confront their own inner turmoil and disordered thoughts. It is at this moment that truly unexpected events begin to unfold. The very individuals who once took their existence for granted now begin to carefully weigh every word intended for them. They reread old messages, analyzing each one. With particular attention, they notice any, even the slightest delay in their responses. Those around them sense that a profound transformation has occurred, but remain unable to precisely define its essence or source. A moment arrives when an individual ceases to be just one of many faces in someone's life. They transform into a kind of mirror, reflecting others' own insecurities and internal contradictions. The paradox is that this state arises without any deliberate action on the part of the detached person. Their distancing, the cessation of endlessly filling others' empty cups, is enough. The departure occurs without dramatic gestures or loud goodbyes, without scenes or the need for closure, leaving behind only an all-encompassing silence. Most people are unable to comprehend such a turn of events. They are accustomed to tumultuous partings, emotionally charged finales, to chaos and destruction. However, when someone leaves their space with dignity and imperturbable detachment, it leaves an indelible mark. It haunts them, generating tormenting questions. Why didn't they try to get me back? Why did they so easily accept my departure? Such discomfort can resonate in the soul for years, finding no resolution. And while the other party remains in this confusion, the detached person is already moving forward, not out of revenge or defiance, but for the sake of returning to their true essence. This is where the true power of unavailability lies. Its essence is not to make others yearn, but to cease needing that yearning. When a person senses someone's detachment, their consciousness does not perceive it as tranquility or peace. On the contrary, it interprets it as a direct threat. The reason lies in a deeply ingrained psychological program. The human brain is programmed to recognize and create patterns. It finds comfort in predictability, striving to know what will happen next, what to expect, how a certain person will react. But as soon as someone deviates from the usual rhythm of interaction, stops responding, explaining, or reacting as before, these expectations are instantly broken, and suddenly, the one who has detached is no longer just a familiar face. They become an unresolved behavioral pattern, and unresolved patterns, by their nature, inevitably demand attention and resolution. This is where the effect of unavailability manifests fully. When an individual seeks less self-justification or excessive explanations, others begin to interpret their essence independently. They concoct hypotheses, conduct their own analyses, make assumptions. Mentally returning to past dialogues, they try to find the exact moment when they lost the previous connection or opportunity for interaction. However, they don't realize that their obsessive thought ceases to be directed at your person. It becomes a reflection of themselves, their inner need to make sense of the cessation of a familiar interaction pattern. In any relationship, be it romantic, platonic, or even professional, there often exists an unspoken, subconscious agreement. You give me your attention, and in return, I grant you a certain level of access. But the moment this privilege of interaction ceases, the human brain registers this state as a loss. And what's particularly important, it doesn't matter how well or poorly they were treated, the feeling of loss still causes discomfort. This happens not because they truly valued your person, but because they were assured of your constant proximity or availability. Carl Jung once indirectly touched upon this concept. When someone projects onto another individual, they are not truly perceiving the object's true essence. They are interacting with their own unsatisfied inner needs, with the hidden aspects of their personality, called shadows. Therefore, when someone becomes unavailable, it forces the other to confront their own inner world. And for some, this proves deeply uncomfortable or even frightening, as previously this person served as a kind of distraction from their inner emptiness or incompleteness. Now that they are gone, only the echo of their own existence remains for them. The state they experience is not just mild regret, but rather a full-blown withdrawal syndrome. Just as the human brain experiences an insatiable craving for dopamine associated with certain substances, it also yearns for emotional stimulation, a sense of control, predictability, and constant attention. Consequently, when an individual withdraws, it generates a psychological hunger of similar intensity. However, at this point, the object of their desire is no longer present to satisfy that need. It is this circumstance that gives the situation its particular power. No bridges had to be burned or anything proven. It was enough to simply return to one's own inner harmony and cease being so readily available. Thus, the person transformed into a kind of mystery in someone else's narrative, and mysteries, as is known, are much harder to forget than mere people. Becoming an unavailable person goes beyond mere external perception by others. It primarily concerns how the individual begins to perceive themselves. A critical moment arrives when actions are no longer dictated by past traumas, but are undertaken from a state of deep awareness. During this period, a person's energy ceases to be haphazardly dispersed across countless interactions, endless explanations, and futile justifications. Instead, it is carefully preserved, securely protected, and purposefully directed in accordance with true intentions. And this profound inner transformation doesn't merely alter interpersonal relationships, it radically changes a person's entire life. It should be noted that most people experience a deep fear of being misunderstood. They mistakenly believe that silence makes them invisible, and detachment inevitably leads to oblivion. However, the truth is that silence itself can create the necessary space. And it is in this newfound space that a person's presence begins to resonate much louder. Moreover, this happens not primarily for others but for oneself. The individual begins to clearly recognize where their life energy is draining, for whom they are forced to diminish their true essence, and what precisely triggers their anxiety. The sudden decision to become less available does not at all mean intentional neglect of others. Rather, it represents a resolute refusal of self-abnegation. Noticeable power lies in the ability to no longer give explanations for why one has become more reserved, undergone inner changes, or why their social circle has significantly narrowed. The individual ceases to feel the need to justify the internal boundaries that are meant to protect their inner peace. The feeling of guilt for being absent from places that inevitably drain their life force also disappears. Instead of paying attention to those who observe their distancing, the person begins to concentrate on the profound feeling that arises when they finally achieve true peace within themselves. From a psychological perspective, this transformation is of colossal significance, as it radically alters an individual's internal reward system. Most people are traditionally accustomed to receiving emotional stimuli and doses of satisfaction from the external world, be it social media approval, verbal praise, heightened attention, or quick responses to messages. However, once a person begins to discover these valuable rewards within themselves, deep tranquility, mental clarity, a sense of groundedness, they literally rewire their brain's neural connections. The chase for thrills and adrenaline ceases, and instead a deep, almost physical craving for peace emerges. And it is this inner stillness or static quality that transforms into a kind of attachment, but in the most beneficial sense of the word. An individual's reactions slow down. They don't rush to respond, don't rush into battle to defend themselves, and don't exert excessive effort to be understood by others. This inner stillness becomes a fundamental pillar of their being, and it is from this state that their perception of the world significantly sharpens. They more quickly recognize potentially alarming signals, begin to see manipulation even before it takes on the guise of attractive charm. Intuition resonates much more clearly for them, as their energy is no longer dissipated in endless attempts to be available to everyone. It is firmly anchored in a state of full presence and attention to one's own self. A period arrives when others truly begin to feel their absence. This happens not due to a defiant or noisy departure, but because once their presence was ubiquitous and readily available, and now they have seemingly dissolved, becoming intangible. And the emerging vacuum, that very space where their energy was once generously and freely given, gradually acquires a sacred status, filling with special value. Paradoxically, most people do not foresee that by gaining a certain unavailability, a person does not plunge into loneliness. On the contrary, they experience a deep and comprehensive sense of freedom. A unique clarity of consciousness emerges only when one manages to detach sufficiently from the usual circle of events to discern hidden patterns and interconnections. At this moment, a simple but profound truth dawns on them. Their care and involvement were never a sign of weakness. Rather, they were excessively available to those who simply were not ready or able to receive. Their true essence and contribution. Such a realization doesn't merely grant liberation, it fundamentally transforms their entire internal paradigm. Once a person deeply understands that their true worth is in no way determined by the amount they give or the degree of their public visibility, they begin to operate, drawing strength from an entirely different, qualitatively new energy. The former fear of losing loved ones or significant people disappears. The oppressive feeling of guilt for not responding promptly to someone's requests or messages no longer arises. The burdensome sensation of needing to constantly explain to others the reasons for their focus on their own needs and development fades away. This profound inner change, like waves, spreads to all aspects of their existence, transforming their interaction with the world. A person's gait takes on a different quality, speech slows, and thoughts become extraordinarily clear. The individual ceases to be reactive, instead demonstrating greater purposefulness in their actions. Those around them sense this profound transformation in their energy field even before they realize what exactly has changed, and this state cannot be imitated. It's not about feigned mystery or forced confidence, but about genuine rootedness in one's own essence, regardless of external approval or its absence. Here lies a remarkable irony. As soon as a person genuinely stops caring about being chosen or recognized, they paradoxically become the one actively sought by others. This happens not because they need others, but precisely because that need no longer exists. Such detachment, stemming from deep inner peace, rather than selfish motives, possesses an extraordinary appeal. It is magnetic, not because it plays at being unavailable, but because it radiates genuine personal integrity. It silently declares, "I am already good enough, regardless of whether you stay or leave." This energy leaves an indelible mark on people's minds, and its influence extends far beyond how others perceive the person. It also transforms how they interact with the world as a whole. The individual stops seeking clarity externally. As they have already cultivated it within themselves, they no longer harbor hopes that someone else will choose them, because they have already made that choice for themselves. And once a person becomes accustomed to such a way of life, serene, focused, deeply rooted in themselves, they begin to genuinely wonder how they ever tolerated the turmoil and anxiety that constituted their former existence. Thus, being unavailable does not at all mean being cold or detached. On the contrary, it signifies inner wholeness and self-sufficiency. It means carefully preserving one's energy, which is as valuable as gold, for that is what it truly is. It is the realization that not everyone deserves access to one's inner world. And once an individual truly grasps this truth, they begin to notice astonishing changes. Their inner peace will deepen, clarity of thought will sharpen, and their life path will begin to unfold naturally, without coercion. When this happens, those around them will undoubtedly notice the changes. They may not articulate it, but they will certainly feel it. The person has transformed, and this time there will be no turning back to their former state. This is what is not commonly discussed. Once an individual steps into this new version of themselves, peaceful, stable, free from attachments, they gradually lose interest in old behavioral patterns, excessive explanations, obsessive rumination, periods of excessive effort. These former ways of being no longer appeal, as inner peace becomes an addiction. And the more diligently a person protects this state, the clearer they understand how costly it was to squander their energy on unworthy things. They begin to prefer silence over insistent proofs of their rightness, solitude over empty and superficial conversations, and conscious intention over haste. Their energy no longer adapts to fill gaps in others' stories or needs. They keep it to themselves, using it judiciously. And the moment someone senses that the former, easy access to this energy becomes impossible, they begin to perceive a profound transformation occurring not only on an emotional but also on an energetic level. A person reaches a state where their entrance into a room is felt without a single word spoken. Their presence becomes palpable on its own. They no longer require external validation to recognize their own worth. By simply embodying a profound sense of self-respect, he implicitly teaches those around him how to treat him without uttering a single word of instruction. The most remarkable aspect of this transformation is the complete absence of fear of being misunderstood. He no longer feels the need to correct every misjudgment or explain his silence, for his life is not driven by the desire to be understood by everyone. Instead, his existence is directed towards achieving inner harmony. This harmony manifests as profound inner peace, a clear understanding of his unique path, and an unshakable inner strength.